The moon rises over Willow Creek like a watchful eye, casting silver light over the sleeping town. But not everyone is asleep. In a lonely house on the edge of town, a woman stares out her window, lost in memories she can't escape. Across the road, an old man walks with his dog, the gravel crunching beneath his boots. And in the distance, a train horn cuts through the silence like a warning. This is the night when everything feels connected and nothing feels safe. The quiet town of Willow Creek lay under a thick veil of midnight silence. It was one of those small American towns where the streets seemed to sleep as soon as the sun dipped behind the hills, where porch lights flickered like tiny stars, and where the sound of a passing car could still be heard from blocks away. On this particular night, the air was heavy, the kind of stillness that felt as though time itself had slowed down, wrapping every home in a blanket of strange quietness. In an old white farmhouse on the outskirts of town, Martha sat alone in her rocking chair, gazing out the window at the moonlight draped over the fields. She had lived there all her life, in the same house her parents built, the same house where she once heard laughter echo through the halls when her children were young. Now, the rooms were silent, and the old wooden floors creaked only for her. Tonight, the silence seemed louder than usual. She watched the wind barely move the tall grass, the old barn door swaying slightly as if breathing in the night. She reached for the worn quilt on her lap, pulled it tighter around her shoulders, and let out a long sigh. Far away, the sound of a train horn cut through the silence. It was a distant, haunting call that came every night at the same time, always from the tracks that ran through the northern edge of town. The locals said no one ever saw that train, only heard it. Martha never believed in ghost stories, but sometimes, especially on nights like this, when her loneliness was too loud, she wondered about that train. Where did it go? Who was on it? Maybe it wasn't a ghost at all. Maybe it was just life rushing by, reminding her of the days she used to feel alive too. Her neighbor, Thomas, lived just across the dusty road, in a small cottage that looked like it had been carved out of time. He was an old war veteran, and his life moved with the same slow rhythm as Martha's. That night, Thomas was sitting on his porch, his old dog sleeping by his feet, his eyes fixed on the stars. He had seen things in his life that would shake most men, yet here he was, sipping tea, letting the night settle into his bones. Every now and then, he would hear Martha's creaky rocking chair from across the way. It was like a song, a sound that reminded him that someone else was awake, someone else was still waiting for the night to end. The streets of Willow Creek were empty. The only light came from the old diner on Main Street, its neon sign buzzing faintly. Inside, Carol, the night waitress, was wiping down the counter for the third time, humming to the soft tunes of the radio. The clock ticked louder than the music, reminding her how slowly the hours crawled. It was always the same faces at the diner at night. The tired truck driver grabbing a late coffee, the lonely man sitting in the corner staring into his cup, and the occasional night wanderer who just wanted to sit and feel like someone saw them. Tonight, though, the diner was empty. Carol looked at the clock, sighed, and poured herself another cup of coffee, the steam rising into the dim light like a ghost as the night stretched on. The town seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere, a phone rang in an empty house and stopped after a few rings, echoing into nothingness. Somewhere else, a door clicked shut, and the sound traveled through the stillness. There was something beautiful about nights like these, the way life slowed down so much that every sound felt like a story. The drip of a faucet, the whisper of wind against a window pane, the distant hum of a car engine on the highway miles away. Martha finally stood up from her rocking chair, feeling the ache in her knees, and walked slowly to the kitchen. She filled a glass of water and leaned against the sink, staring at the faded wallpaper. She thought about the days when the house was filled with laughter and noise, about her late husband who used to sing softly while fixing the old truck in the yard. She closed her eyes and let the memories wash over her like waves. Nights like these always brought them back, the good and the sad, all tangled together like roots of an old tree. Meanwhile, Thomas decided to take a short walk down the road. He put on his coat, whistled for his dog, and began his slow stroll. The gravel crunched under his boots, and the night air felt cool against his face. He passed Martha's house and saw her kitchen light glowing softly. For a moment, he thought about knocking on her door, maybe sharing a cup of coffee, but instead he just kept walking. There was something sacred about the quiet, something that didn't need to be interrupted. He looked up at the stars again, the endless sky stretching above him, and wondered if his wife, gone for over 20 years, was watching him from somewhere up there. The night rolled on, minute by minute, hour by hour, each second dragging its feet like an old, tired traveler. In the distance, the train horn sounded again, closer this time, almost as if it was calling someone. Carol at the diner looked up, her hands pausing on the counter. Martha heard it too, her hand tightening around her glass. Thomas stopped in his tracks on the road. For a brief moment, it felt like the whole town was listening to that sound, like it was a secret message meant for all of them, a reminder that time was still moving even when everything felt frozen. As the first hint of dawn began to touch the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of purple and gray, the night finally began to let go. Martha returned to her chair and watched the light change through her window. Thomas turned back toward his home, his dog trotting quietly beside him. Carol poured one last cup of coffee before the morning shift arrived. And Willow Creek, with its quiet streets and sleeping houses, prepared for another day, another night, another slow and steady rhythm of life that would keep repeating, just as it always had. A real incident in the quiet stretches of the United States, where small towns breathe in the rhythm of the night, there are stories that unravel slowly, carrying the weight of silence and the whisper of time. Imagine a long highway cutting through endless plains, where the moonlight glints faintly off the silver lines of the road, and a gentle breeze rustles through fields that have been standing for decades. The night is deep, yet it holds a strange comfort, as though the world has paused just to let the stars shine a little brighter. Somewhere, in a small wooden house at the edge of a sleepy town, a single light burns in the window, flickering like a beacon in the darkness. The house is old, its wooden frame sighing under the weight of years, its walls holding countless memories of laughter, sorrow, and quiet evenings by the fire. Inside, the creak of floorboards is the only sound, and the warmth of the air feels like it has been there forever. A man sits in a worn-out armchair, staring into nothingness, lost in thoughts that seem as slow and steady as the ticking of the clock on the wall. He remembers days when the sun seemed to last forever, when summers were filled with the scent of freshly cut grass and the distant hum of cicadas. Now, time moves differently. It is not rushed or loud, but drips gently, like rain against an old tin roof. The man closes his eyes, and in the silence, he can almost hear the voices of the past, the echoes of people who once filled this home with life. The wind outside shifts, carrying with it the faint scent of pine trees, and somewhere far away, the low hum of a passing train drifts across the fields. The story moves further into the night. Across town, there is a diner still open, its neon sign buzzing faintly under the weight of years. A lone trucker sits by the window, sipping on lukewarm coffee, his gaze lost in the shadows of the road outside. He is a man of few words, someone who has seen countless sunsets through the windshield of his truck and countless nights stretched across highways that seem to have no end. Tonight, he is simply waiting, not for anything in particular, just waiting for the night to pass, for the world to keep turning. The waitress behind the counter wipes down the same spot again and again, her mind far away, perhaps on dreams she once had but never chased. The hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clink of a coffee cup are the only things that fill the silence. It's the kind of quiet that can put anyone into a soft, slow trance, where thoughts dissolve into the night air and nothing feels urgent anymore. The scene drifts like a slow-moving cloud. In the distance, beyond the town, a river glides under a steel bridge. Its surface mirrors the stars above, creating a world where the sky and the water become one. Along the banks, trees stand tall, their dark shapes swaying gently with the wind, and the sound of water moving against the stones is as calming as a lullaby. There is a fisherman sitting by the shore, though he isn't there to catch anything. He just watches the current, letting his mind drift with the water, thinking of nothing and everything all at once. The cool night air brushes against his face, and the world feels vast yet tender, as though time itself has slowed to breathe. As the night deepens, the story lingers through different places, a farm where the fields stretch endlessly under the moonlight, where an old barn stands like a memory of hard work and long days. Inside the barn, the scent of hay mixes with the cool night air, and somewhere in the shadows, a cat curls up, purring softly as it drifts to sleep. On the farmhouse porch, an elderly couple sits quietly, rocking back and forth in wooden chairs, their faces softened by years of shared memories. They don't need to speak. The silence between them is filled with the comfort of a life well lived, of countless nights just like this one, where nothing is asked of them except to simply exist. The world grows quieter still. In a nearby forest, the trees stand tall like ancient guardians, their branches whispering secrets to the night. The air is cool, filled with the earthy scent of leaves and moss. An owl calls out in the distance, its sound echoing softly through the woods. A small creek trickles nearby, its water glistening under the pale glow of the moon. Everything here feels slow and deliberate, as though time has no need to hurry. It is the kind of silence that wraps around you, drawing you into a deep calm, where every breath feels softer. Every sound feels like part of a distant dream. The night continues, stretching on, carrying with it the stories of places unseen and people unheard. There is no rush, no sharp turns, only a soft flow, like a river that knows its path. Somewhere, a clock chimes softly, marking the passing of another hour, but time feels irrelevant now. The world has melted into a haze of quiet roads, empty diners, whispering fields, and starlit skies. The man in the wooden house drifts into sleep, his memories fading into dreams. The trucker finishes his coffee, his thoughts dissolving like sugar into the night. The fisherman by the river leans back, the sound of water pulling him into a state of peace. The elderly couple on the porch slowly close their eyes, their rocking chairs swaying gently as if in tune with the rhythm of the world. This night belongs to silence, to the steady beat of a world that is both vast and intimate. It is a night where nothing dramatic happens, yet every moment feels like a quiet story of its own, a gentle reminder that sometimes the world doesn't need to rush or shout. Sometimes it just needs to breathe. The stars remain, the moon holds its place, and the night drifts on like a soft lullaby, carrying you deeper into its calm embrace. Story 3. The Desert Night in the heart of the American Southwest, where the desert stretches like an endless canvas of sand and stone. The night begins with a hush so deep it feels almost sacred. The horizon glows faintly as the last traces of sunlight fade, and the stars slowly take their places, scattering across the sky like diamonds spilled on black velvet. The desert air is cool now, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and dry earth, and the world feels vast, silent, and still. Far out on a dusty road that winds between rocky cliffs, an old pickup truck sits parked under the shadow of a towering cactus. Its engine has been turned off, and the only sound is the distant rustle of wind sweeping across the open land. Inside the truck, a young woman leans against the seat, gazing out through the windshield at the horizon. She isn't thinking about much, just letting the night stretch around her like a blanket. The silence of the desert feels like it could swallow every thought, leaving only the hum of existence. Somewhere nearby, a small desert town is settling in for the night. The diner at the edge of town has its lights dimmed, the sign above the door buzzing faintly with age. Inside, the smell of old coffee lingers, mixing with the faint aroma of grilled onions and bacon that clings to the walls. A man with a weathered face, a traveler passing through, sits alone at the counter. He stirs his coffee absent-mindedly, watching the steam rise like a ghost in the dim light. The waitress moves quietly, refilling his cup without a word. The silence between them is not uncomfortable, just heavy with the kind of understanding that comes from being strangers on the same lonely road. Outside the town, the desert comes alive in its own way. Coyotes howl in the distance, their calls rising and falling in eerie harmony. A tumbleweed rolls lazily across the empty street, carried by the soft desert wind. The stars above shine brighter here than in any city, so bright that they seem close enough to touch. The Milky Way stretches like a luminous river across the sky, and in the stillness of the moment, it feels as if time has stopped altogether. The night deepens. In the shadow of a rocky mesa, a small fire burns low, its flames flickering against the stones. A traveler sits beside it, not for warmth, but for the comfort of the light. He watches the sparks rise and vanish into the darkness, thinking of the countless people who have passed through these lands before him. The desert holds stories older than memory, carved into the stone by wind and time, and in the silence, it feels as if those stories are whispering just beyond hearing. Somewhere out there, a train moves through the night, its distant horn echoing softly across the plains. The sound drifts through the desert like a lullaby, slow and mournful, fading as it moves on. The traveler leans back, looking up at the stars, and the world feels infinite, quiet, and gentle. Would you like me to continue with Story 3? Story 4. The coastal night on the eastern edge of Maine, where the rocky cliffs drop into the restless Atlantic Ocean. The night arrives with the slow rhythm of waves crashing against the shore. The salty air is cool and damp, carrying the faint sound of seagulls settling in for the evening. The lighthouse on the edge of the cliff turns its beam in a steady, unhurried circle, cutting through the fog like an old guardian keeping watch over the sea. Down by the water, a fisherman stands on the pier, his hands resting on the railing as he stares out at the black horizon. He isn't waiting for anything in particular. He's just there, letting the sounds of the sea wash over him. The waves crash and retreat, like a heartbeat that has existed long before him and will continue long after. He remembers the stories his grandfather used to tell him about ships lost to the storms, and he feels small against the vastness of the ocean. In a small cottage nearby, the windows glow warmly against the night. A woman sits at a wooden table, a cup of tea in her hands, listening to the faint creak of the house as it settles against the ocean breeze. She can hear the waves from here, even with the doors closed, and it feels like the ocean itself is breathing. The wind whistles softly against the glass, and the sound is comforting, like an old song she has always known. Farther down the coastline, a beach lies empty except for the footprints of someone who walked here hours ago. The sand is cool, damp with the tide, and tiny shells glisten faintly in the moonlight. The ocean rolls endlessly, its dark waters reflecting the stars above. It is a night where nothing needs to happen. The world simply is, and that is enough. Story 5. The Desert Night. The desert begins to quiet itself the moment the sun sets, as though the world has taken a deep breath and decided to rest. In the American Southwest, the air turns cool quickly, the heat of the day fading into the sand and the stones. The horizon is vast here, an endless stretch of earth meeting sky, and the first stars appear timidly, like tiny sparks just beginning to glow. The silence is deep, but not empty. It holds whispers, the rustle of wind through dry shrubs, the faint hum of insects, and the distant call of a coyote, its voice carrying far across the open land. A single highway cuts through the desert, a dark ribbon of asphalt glinting faintly under the rising moon. An old pickup truck slows to a stop on the side of the road. The driver, a woman with tired eyes, steps out and leans against the truck's warm hood. She doesn't rush, doesn't even check her watch. There is no reason to hurry. The night stretches endlessly, and for a moment, all she wants is to look at the sky. Above her, the stars are brighter than she has ever seen, a sea of light spilling across the dark canvas. She exhales slowly, feeling her shoulders drop as if the desert itself is soaking away her worries. The road remains empty. No cars pass, no engines hum, just silence, deep and unbroken. A warm breeze brushes past, carrying the scent of dry earth and a hint of sage. The woman climbs back into the truck, but she doesn't start the engine. Instead, she sits there, hands resting on the steering wheel, lost in thought. The dashboard clock ticks softly, its rhythm merging with the quiet pulse of the desert a few miles away. A tiny desert town begins to settle in for the night. The buildings are few and scattered, their windows glowing faintly under the moonlight. A diner sits at the edge of the road, its neon sign flickering. Inside, the last customers are finishing their meals. A trucker with weathered hands sips his coffee, his gaze distant, perhaps thinking of the miles he still has to travel. The waitress, her apron smudged with flour and grease, moves slowly, wiping the counter even though it's already clean. The hum of the refrigerator and the soft clinking of plates are the only sounds. It's the kind of quiet that feels both comforting and heavy, like the world is wrapped in cotton. As the trucker finishes his drink, the bell above the diner's door jingles softly, but no one comes in. The sound lingers, then fades, and the room grows still again. Outside, the desert wind stirs, pushing a tumbleweed across the parking lot. It rolls lazily, as though even the wind has nowhere to go. Far beyond the town, the desert stretches into shadowy plains and jagged cliffs. A campfire burns low in the distance, its glow like a tiny heartbeat against the darkness. A traveler sits beside it, cross-legged, staring into the flames. He pokes at the embers with a stick, watching sparks leap and vanish into the night. There is no sound but the fire's quiet crackle. He looks up, eyes tracing constellations that have guided countless travelers before him. The night sky is so clear that even the faintest stars seem sharp, like tiny needles of light. The fire shifts, and he leans back, letting the desert night wash over him. He can hear the faintest whisper of the wind moving through the rocks, almost like voices from a distant time. Perhaps it is the desert's way of telling its stories, tales carved into stone, written in the sand, and carried by the night breeze. Hours pass slowly here. The moon climbs higher, casting pale light across the desert floor. Shadows stretch long and thin, creating patterns like dark rivers winding between the rocks. A small animal scurries by, its tiny feet leaving prints in the sand that will vanish by morning. The air cools further, wrapping the world in a calm stillness. The woman in the pickup truck finally starts the engine. It rumbles softly, breaking the silence for just a moment before she pulls back onto the highway, her headlights slicing through the darkness. She drives with no destination, just following the road as it unwinds endlessly ahead. Back in the town, the diner has gone dark. The waitress has locked the doors, the trucker has long since left, and the only light comes from a single street lamp buzzing faintly. The town sleeps, wrapped in the same slow, heavy silence that covers the desert. The stars above remain constant, glowing like watchful eyes. Near the rocky cliffs, the traveler has let his fire burn down to glowing coals. He lies on his back, hands folded on his chest, staring at the sky. He feels as though the desert has paused just for him. The silence a gift, the stars a lullaby. His thoughts drift, and soon he closes his eyes, letting the desert night cradle him. The desert does not rush. It does not demand. It simply is a vast, quiet world where time feels softer, where every sound is a whisper and every breath feels like part of a greater rhythm. The night stretches on, endless and calm. Story 6: The Atlantic Ocean breathes in slow, rhythmic waves against the rugged coastline of Maine. At night, The sea feels older, wiser, and calmer, as though its heartbeat has slowed under the weight of the stars above. The salty air lingers with the faint tang of seaweed and the coolness of mist rolling in from the horizon. The tide is neither rushed nor violent tonight. It simply rises and falls, like the steady inhaling and exhaling of the earth itself. Perched on the edge of a rocky cliff, the lighthouse stands tall, its beam of light rotating in deliberate, unhurried circles. It casts long, pale arcs across the dark waters, glinting off the white tips of the waves. Each sweep of light is like a breath, a soft pulse against the darkness, as though the tower itself is alive, watching over the vastness of the sea. Inside the lighthouse, a single lantern glows warm, illuminating a small wooden room filled with the scent of oil and salt. The keeper, a quiet man with weathered hands, sits at a table writing in a logbook. His pen scratches slowly across the page. He has done this for years, marking the tides, the winds, the quietness of nights like these. Far below, the rocks glisten under the moonlight, polished smooth by centuries of crashing waves. The sound of the water colliding against stone is soft tonight, like a distant applause, as though the sea is content to rest. A thin layer of fog begins to creep inland, drifting over the rocks and curling around the narrow path that leads to the lighthouse. It is the kind of night where even time seems slower, where every moment stretches gently into the next. Not far from the lighthouse, a small coastal town lies asleep. Wooden houses line the shore, their windows glowing faintly, their roofs damp with mist. Along the harbor, fishing boats rock slowly, their ropes creaking against the docks. A single lantern burns on the pier, its light dancing across the water's surface. There is only one person there, a fisherman sitting quietly on a wooden bench, a wool blanket draped over his shoulders. He doesn't look at the sea with expectation. He is not here to fish tonight. He is simply here to listen, to let the sounds of the water and the cries of distant gulls sink into his thoughts. The ocean speaks in ways he cannot explain, and on nights like this, its voice is all he needs. The man lights a small pipe, the glow of the ember reflected in his tired eyes. He exhales slowly, watching the smoke curl upward and dissolve into the damp night air. Each breath feels deliberate, as though he is inhaling the history of this coast, of storms weathered, of ships that sailed beyond the horizon and never returned, of the unchanging rhythm of tide and moon. Farther along the coastline, the waves smooth out against a crescent-shaped beach. The sand is cool and damp, the kind that holds footprints as though reluctant to let them go. Someone walked here earlier, their steps now frozen in time, leading toward the water and vanishing at the tide's edge. The moon casts a pale glow over the shoreline, turning the wet sand into silver. A single seashell lies half buried near the rocks, catching the light as if it were a tiny treasure left by the sea itself. In a cottage not far from the beach, a woman sits by her window with a steaming cup of tea between her hands. She listens to the faint moan of the wind slipping through the gaps in the wood. Her home is simple: a table, a chair, a small stove, but it feels alive with warmth. She watches the lighthouse beams sweep across the horizon, its steady rhythm almost hypnotic. In the background, The low crackle of a fire fills the silence, and every now and then, the woman closes her eyes, letting the sounds blend together. The sea, the wind, the faint heartbeat of the night. Hours pass, but the night does not change much. That is the beauty of this coast. It doesn't hurry to become something else. The waves continue their slow dance, the fog thickens slightly, and the lighthouse keeps its silent watch. The fisherman on the pier eventually rises, stretches, and begins walking down the wooden planks. His boots thud softly against the boards, the sound blending with the lap of water below. As he passes the boats, he reaches out to touch one of them, his fingers brushing against the cold, wet wood. It's a boat he's owned for years, though tonight it stays tied. Tonight is not for sailing. Tonight is for listening. Somewhere in the distance, a ship's horn sounds, low and mournful, cutting through the fog. The fisherman stops and looks out toward the sound, though the ship itself is hidden beyond the mist. The sound carries for a long moment, echoing across the water, before fading back into the silence. The night deepens. In the town, the last lanterns are extinguished, and the streets become dark, save for the pale glow of the moon. A stray cat prowls along a fence, its shadow stretching long against the wall. It moves quietly, like a ghost of the night, disappearing and reappearing between pools of moonlight. The town is asleep, the people wrapped in dreams, while outside, the ocean continues its endless song. The lighthouse keeper stands at the top of the tower now, leaning against the railing as he looks out over the water. He can see far in every direction, the fog shifting in slow patterns, the white foam where waves meet the rocks, the faint light of the town. He feels the cool wind on his face, carrying with it the sharp, clean scent of the sea. It is a scent that feels both ancient and new every time. He watches the horizon for a long while, not because he expects anything to appear, but simply because there is peace in watching something so vast and unchanging that a gull cries once, circling above the dark water, and then settles somewhere unseen. The fisherman has returned to his home. The cottage windows are dim, and the beach lies empty again. The tide moves quietly, creeping farther up the sand, erasing the footprints from earlier, as though the night wants to keep its secrets be why now. The moon has climbed higher, casting a silver path across the ocean. It looks like a road of light stretching to the horizon. The lighthouse beam continues to sweep over it, steady and constant, like the beat of time itself. And so the night carries on, calm and slow. Nothing dramatic happens here. Nothing needs to. The coast does not exist for stories or for movement. It exists for moments like this, where the world feels soft and suspended, where the only sound is the sigh of the waves and the gentle whisper of the wind through the rocks. All right, let's continue with story 7. The mountain cabin. This will have the same calming, slow-paced, and immersive tone. The mountain cabin. The Appalachian Mountains are quiet tonight. The last glow of sunset has vanished behind the dark peaks, and the sky is now a velvet expanse, dotted with stars. The mountains breathe differently at night, their stillness almost sacred. The air is crisp and cool, carrying with it the scent of pine and damp earth. High on a narrow, winding road, there is a small cabin nestled among tall trees. Its roof is lined with fallen leaves, and its windows emit a soft golden light, like a beacon of warmth in a sea of shadows. Inside the cabin, a fire crackles in the stone fireplace. The flames dance lazily, casting flickering patterns on the wooden walls. A man sits in a sturdy rocking chair, his hands resting on the armrests, his gaze fixed on the window. He watches as the wind shakes the branches outside, sending shadows swaying across the moonlit ground. There is no rush in his movements. He shifts slightly, leans back, and takes a slow breath. The mountains seem to have a way of slowing time, of stripping away the noise of the world, leaving only the quiet hum of existence on the wooden table near him. A cup of tea steams softly. The scent of herbs mingles with the warm, smoky aroma of the fireplace. Every now and then, he takes a sip, the warmth of the tea spreading through him. He doesn't need words or thoughts right now. The silence of the cabin is enough, a silence that feels full rather than empty. Outside, the forest is alive in its own subtle way. Crickets chirp, their song steady and unbroken, while an owl hoots from somewhere deep in the woods. The sound echoes softly between the trees. A small creek runs nearby, its gentle trickle adding to the night's symphony. The forest floor is covered in fallen leaves, and when the breeze passes, they rustle like whispers between old friends. As the night deepens, the temperature drops slightly, and a thin mist begins to curl around the base of the trees. The moonlight filters through the mist, creating silver beams that dance between the branches. Somewhere far off, a fox moves quietly, its paws patting softly on the damp earth. It pauses to sniff the air before disappearing into the underbrush, leaving behind only silence. The man in the cabin rises from his chair and steps outside onto the porch. The wooden boards creak beneath his weight. He leans against the railing, looking out at the dark expanse of trees that seem endless. The air here feels purer, sharper, almost like it carries the memory of the rain that fell days ago. He takes a deep breath, the cool air filling his lungs, and listens. There is something comforting about hearing nothing but nature. No engines, no voices, just the quiet life of the mountain. Far below in the valley, a few scattered lights mark the presence of another cabin or two, but they are distant, like tiny stars clinging to the ground. The rest of the world is wrapped in darkness, and for the first time all day, the man feels as though the mountain belongs entirely to him. He stays there for a while, listening to the distant call of an owl, the rustle of a raccoon moving through the leaves, the steady song of crickets. The forest is never truly silent. It is filled with soft sounds that lull the mind into calmness. The man thinks about the days he spent here years ago, chopping wood, hiking trails, and sitting under these same stars. Nothing has changed. The mountains do not change quickly. They hold their stories in the rocks and trees, waiting for those who take the time to listen. After some time, he returns inside. The fire has burned down a little, its flame smaller but still warm. He adds another log, the wood hissing softly as it catches the embers. The light fills the room again, dancing over the old photographs on the wall, over the books stacked in the corner, over the wool blanket draped across the couch. It is a small, humble cabin, but it feels like home, even if only for a night. The hours pass gently. The man moves from the chair to the couch, lying back with his hands behind his head. He watches the flicker of the fire, the way the shadows stretch and shift across the room. Outside, the wind picks up slightly, brushing against the walls like a soft hand. It is not the kind of wind that chills or frightens. It is the kind that sings softly, blending with the other quiet sounds of the forest. Eventually, the fire burns low again, and the man gets up once more. He steps outside, this time walking down the few steps of the porch and onto the dirt path that leads into the trees. He doesn't go far, just enough to stand under the open sky. Above him, the stars stretch endlessly, brighter here than anywhere else. The Milky Way is a glowing river of light, cutting across the heavens. He stands there for a long time, looking up, feeling small but peaceful. The night continues. The creek continues its soft song. The trees continue their gentle sway. And the cabin, warm and glowing, stands like a guardian in the darkness. It is a place where nothing needs to happen, where every moment is enough just as it is. The night draws to a close, not with a sudden stop, but with a gentle fade, like the slow dimming of a lantern. The stars remain above, steady and patient, while the world below drifts deeper into stillness. There is no rush here, no need for thought or movement. Just the soft hum of the earth, the calm whisper of the night air, and the steady rhythm of time, carrying you softly, easily, into dreams. Close your eyes, let the world grow quiet, and allow yourself to rest. The night will keep watch,